I never thought my life would be anything extraordinary. My days were filled with the usual rhythm of responsibility, waking up early, making coffee, and heading out to my job as a social worker in Phoenix, Arizona. It was a fulfilling career, but also one that weighed heavily on my heart. I spent my days listening to stories of struggle, pain, and loss, doing my best to offer hope to those who had none. I was good at hiding my own exhaustion, convincing myself that if I just kept moving, everything would be fine. But the truth was, I was running on empty. At 50 years old, I had spent decades caring for others while neglecting myself. The long hours, the emotional burden, it all accumulated in silence. I ignored the headaches, the dizziness, the shortness of breath. I told myself I was just tired, that I needed a vacation, that I'd be fine. I had plans for the future. I wanted to travel, to finally take care of my health, to live a little more for myself. But plans don't always go the way we expect. That morning, March 20th, 2021, started like any other. The Arizona sun was already hot by the time I left home, my coffee half finished in a to-go cup. I had a full schedule at the community center, and I barely had time to think between meetings. I was speaking with a young mother about a housing program when it happened. A strange sensation washed over me, like the air had suddenly grown too heavy. My heart pounded in my chest, erratic and unfamiliar. The room blurred. Voices turned into distant echoes. I tried to reach for my desk, but my fingers wouldn't respond. A sharp pain shot through my chest, and before I could understand what was happening, my legs gave out beneath me. The last thing I remember was someone shouting my name. Then darkness, a glimpse beyond the veil. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in that office. I was standing outside my body, looking down at the chaos unfolding around me. My co-workers were panicked, paramedics rushing in, trying desperately to bring me back. I saw them pressing on my chest, their voices urgent, filled with dread. But I felt none of it. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't in pain. There was only peace. A peace so profound that it felt like a whisper from eternity itself. As I stood there watching the scene before me, I became aware of something else. Or rather, someone. A presence unlike anything I had ever encountered. It wasn't just around me, it was within me, filling every empty space I never even realized existed. It was love, pure and infinite, wrapping around me with an embrace that transcended human understanding. And then I saw him, the presence that changed everything. He stood before me, radiant and overwhelming, yet somehow familiar. I had always believed in him. I grew up hearing about his love, his mercy, his sacrifice. But nothing could have prepared me for this moment. He wasn't just an idea or a historical figure, or a distant God watching from the heavens. He was here, with me. And his eyes, oh his eyes, held a depth of love that made me feel utterly known. In that instant, every mistake, every regret, every burden I had carried in silence, it all melted away. There was no condemnation, no disappointment, just love, so pure, so consuming it brought me to my knees. He reached out, his voice both powerful and gentle. "You are not done yet." The words echoed through me, filling every fiber of my being. Before I could even ask what he meant, everything around me shifted. The peace, the warmth, it was replaced by something else entirely. The air grew thick, charged with a weight I couldn't describe. And in the blink of an eye, I was no longer standing in his presence. Instead, I found myself in a place that defied all understanding. A place where the future was unfolding before my very eyes. Be part of this community. Before we continue this incredible journey, I want to invite you to be part of this community. If you feel connected to this story, if it touches something deep inside of you, make sure to subscribe to this channel and leave a like on this video. And I have something special for you. Comment your name and the city you're watching from, and in the next video I will send a special message just for you. Imagine hearing your name spoken, your city mentioned, knowing that thousands of others will hear it too. Let's make this community a place where we are truly connected, where we support each other through faith and revelation. Now let's continue, because what I saw next changed everything. The moment I was taken from his presence, everything around me shifted. It wasn't darkness, nor was it light. It was something in between, a vast expanse that seemed to stretch beyond what my human mind could comprehend. Time no longer felt linear. I wasn't simply watching. I was experiencing something far greater than myself. The weight of existence itself pressed against me, yet I felt no fear. Instead, I was consumed by an overwhelming sense of knowing. I was standing at the threshold of something eternal, something no words could ever fully describe. Then the vision began. The first revelation, the great deception. A veil lifted before my eyes, and suddenly, I was no longer in that vast expanse. I was inside a different reality, one that looked strikingly similar to the world I had known, but something was wrong. At first glance, everything seemed normal. I saw city streets filled with people, homes bustling with life, churches filled with worshippers. But as I looked closer, I noticed a distortion, a subtle twisting of truth. It was in the air, in the way people spoke, in the very fabric of society. Jesus' voice echoed inside of me, without sound yet unshakable in its clarity. Many will be deceived. I turned and saw figures standing in places of authority. Leaders, influencers, even pastors, speaking with confidence and conviction. Their words were beautiful, their messages filled with promises of peace and unity. But beneath the surface, something felt wrong. They spoke of love, but it was a love without truth. They preached acceptance, but it was at the cost of righteousness. They promised enlightenment, but it led only to darkness. And the most terrifying part, people followed them eagerly. I watched as families, communities, entire nations embraced the lies, believing they were walking in light when, in reality, they were being led further into spiritual blindness. I could feel the weight of deception hanging over them like a fog, dulling their senses, numbing their spirits. Even those who once stood firm in faith were beginning to waver. "They do not see it," Jesus whispered. "They do not hear. But some will awaken." A flicker of hope in the darkness. Just as despair threatened to consume me, I saw it. A light, small at first, barely noticeable against the thick darkness. It flickered in the distance, then another and another. I turned to see a group of people, scattered, small in number, yet unmistakably different. Their eyes were open, their hearts were steadfast. They did not bow to the falsehoods, nor did they shrink back in fear. Instead, they stood unwavering, while the world around them continued to spiral. And then I realized, they weren't simply resisting, they were fighting. With every prayer, every act of true faith, every refusal to conform to deception, they shattered the lies surrounding them. Their light spread, igniting others who had been lost in the darkness. It wasn't a movement of force, nor was it born out of rebellion. It was truth, pure and unshakable, cutting through the deception like a sword. Yet, despite this hope, I knew the battle was only beginning. The world was shifting. The deception was growing stronger. And those who refused to bow to it would face a cost greater than they had ever imagined. The weight of this vision bore down on me, but I knew it was only the beginning. I was about to witness something even greater, something that would shake the very foundations of the world. As the vision of deception faded, I felt myself being drawn deeper into an unseen realm, a place beyond the limits of time and space. My surroundings shifted, no longer tethered to the physical world. It was as if I was standing at the very edge of existence itself, where reality and eternity intertwined. I could feel something stirring around me, a presence so vast it sent shivers through my soul. Then, without warning, the veil between the physical and the spiritual was torn apart, and I saw what had always been hidden from human eyes. A war beyond this world. Before me, an unfathomable battle raged. A war not of flesh and blood, but of powers and dominions, of light and darkness. I saw beings of radiant glory, their forms indescribable, wielding weapons forged from pure light. Their presence exuded strength, authority, and a holiness so profound I could barely comprehend it. These were not mere warriors. They were messengers of the Almighty, engaged in battle against something equally terrifying. Opposing them were shadowed figures, grotesque and twisted, their movements filled with malice and rage. Their forms were constantly shifting, as if they thrived in the very chaos they created. They fought with a venomous hatred, striking at the warriors of light, seeking to overtake them. The battle was relentless. And yet, the most chilling revelation was this: had always been happening, right above us, right around us, unseen, unnoticed, a war that never ceased. The unseen influence on Earth. As I stood amidst this supernatural conflict, I was given a terrifying insight. Every moment of doubt, every whisper of despair, every movement towards sin, these forces fed upon them. The deception I had seen spreading across the earth. It wasn't random. It was crafted, orchestrated, planted into the hearts of men by these unseen forces. The battles of the human world, corruption, wars, division, the decay of morality, they all had roots in this unseen war. I saw cities covered in a spiritual fog, thick and suffocating, distorting the truth and bending the hearts of the people. I saw places of power, governments, institutions, even churches, where darkness had taken root, twisting truth into something unrecognizable. And yet, there was still hope. For every stronghold of darkness, there were pockets of light, places where people stood firm, where prayers rose like incense, piercing through the suffocating haze. I saw gatherings of believers, their hands raised, their voices calling upon the name of the Lord, and with each cry, the darkness shuddered. The authority of those who stand in truth. Jesus' voice resonated through me, filling my spirit with unshakable clarity. The battle is real, but my people are not powerless. I watched as those who remained in Him, who truly walked in faith and obedience, began to radiate with an otherworldly light. It wasn't their strength. It wasn't their intelligence. It wasn't their efforts. It was Him. I saw a woman in her home, on her knees in prayer, tears streaming down her face. Around her, shadows circled, whispering lies of fear and despair. But she did not move. She did not waver. And as she whispered the name Jesus, the shadows shrieked and fled. I saw a young man walking the streets of a darkened city, his heart steadfast. Every step he took left an imprint of light behind him, invisible to human eyes, but devastating to the forces of darkness. I saw children, yes, children, standing in unwavering faith, their innocence and belief in the name of Jesus breaking strongholds that had existed for generations. And then I understood. This war wasn't fought with weapons of man. It wasn't won by arguments, by debates, by earthly power. It was won in the secret place, in prayer, in surrender, in choosing truth over comfort, faith over fear, obedience over compromise. This was the power the enemy feared most. The warning that shook me to my core. Jesus turned to me, His expression filled with both sorrow and urgency. "Few understand the war they are in," He said, "and fewer still walk in the authority I have given them." Then I saw something that made my heart sink. I saw those who called themselves believers, yet they walked blind to the battle around them. Some were distracted, consumed by the pursuit of success, comfort, and approval. Others were weary, worn down by trials, barely holding on. And worst of all, some had unknowingly aligned themselves with the very darkness they claimed to stand against. They spoke of love but denied His truth. They claimed faith but never sought His presence. They lived in comfort, while the world around them perished in deception. And the forces of darkness laughed, for they knew that these people would never stand against them. Jesus' words rang through my soul like a thunderclap. It is time to awaken. The urgency in His voice sent a chill through my being. For what I was about to see next would change everything. As Jesus' words echoed through my soul, the scene before me began to shift once more. The battlefield of the unseen realm faded into the distance, and suddenly, I was standing on the streets of New York City. It was night, and the city lights flickered like stars against the towering skyline. People moved through the streets, lost in their own worlds, unaware that something monumental was about to unfold. But I could feel it. The air was charged with an electricity, an anticipation that set my heart racing. And then it began. A sudden outpouring. First it was subtle. I saw a young man in a cafe, staring at his laptop screen. He was a skeptic, a thinker, someone who had always dismissed faith as fantasy. But in that moment, something stirred within him, an undeniable pull. His hands trembled as he set down his coffee, his eyes filling with unshed tears. Then, across the city, a woman walking home from work stopped in her tracks. A soundless call echoed inside of her, a whisper too powerful to ignore. Her breath hitched, and without knowing why, she fell to her knees right there on the sidewalk, her soul breaking open as she encountered a presence she had never known before. And it wasn't just them. All over the city, all over the country, all over the world, people were being awakened. I saw groups of strangers coming together in the middle of parks, in offices, on public transit. Some wept. Some lifted their hands to the sky, overwhelmed by a love they couldn't explain. Others simply knew, deep within their bones, that everything they had ever believed was about to change. Jesus turned to me, his eyes burning with a fire unlike anything I had seen before. "My spirit is moving," he said, "and nothing will stop it. The division begins." But as this great awakening spread, so did something else. Resistance. I saw those who mocked, those who dismissed what was happening as hysteria or religious fanaticism. News outlets scrambled to explain it away, calling it a mass delusion, a psychological event. Governments issued statements urging people to stay calm, as if what was happening was something to fear. But the fear wasn't coming from the people, it was coming from the powers that be. They knew. They knew that something beyond their control was happening, that hearts were turning toward a power greater than them, that for the first time, millions of people were opening their eyes and refusing to be manipulated by fear, deception, or worldly systems. And so the opposition rose. Policies were enacted. Restrictions were placed. Those who experienced this awakening were ridiculed, silenced, even cast out of their jobs, their communities. The cost of standing firm became greater by the day. And yet, the movement only grew stronger, because those who had tasted the truth could never go back to the darkness. I turned to Jesus, my heart heavy. "What will happen to them?" I asked. He looked at me, his expression both sorrowful and resolute. "Many will fall away when the cost is too high," he said. "But those who endure will be part of something the world has never seen before." And then he showed me what was coming next. "A special invitation for you. Before we continue this incredible revelation, I want to take a moment to invite you to be part of something special. If this message is speaking to you, if you feel something stirring deep inside, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below with your name and the city you're watching from, because in the next video, I'm going to be sending a special greeting to you personally. Imagine hearing your name spoken, your city mentioned, knowing that thousands will see it. Let's make this community a place of connection, faith, and revelation. And don't forget to leave a like on this video. It helps spread this message so more people can be part of what's happening. Now let's continue, because what comes next will change everything. The world around me blurred again, and I felt as if I were being lifted higher, above the cities, above the land, into a place where time itself lost meaning. My soul was weightless, yet charged with an urgency I had never known before. Jesus stood beside me, his presence unwavering. His expression carried both deep love and a profound seriousness, as if what he was about to reveal would forever change the course of my existence. "The awakening is only the beginning," he said. "Now, I will show you why you were called to witness this." The weight of his words pressed against me. Then the vision opened before my eyes. A call to action in the midst of chaos. I saw people, thousands, millions, standing at a crossroads. Some were running toward the light, their faces filled with determination. Others hesitated, fear gripping their hearts. And then there were those who turned away, walking back into the comfort of the familiar, even though it led only to darkness. A separation was taking place. The world was no longer a place of neutrality. You either stood in truth or you were lost in deception. I watched as those who had been awakened began to move, stepping forward with boldness I had never seen before. These were not preachers, not world leaders, not the famous or powerful. They were ordinary people, mothers and fathers, workers and students, young and old. Yet each of them radiated something different, a fire, an authority that came from beyond themselves. And then I understood. This was the mission. It wasn't about simply knowing the truth. It was about declaring it, living it, walking in it. Those who had been given the light were now called to carry it, not just in words but in deeds. Not just in churches but everywhere, in workplaces, in schools, in homes, in the very heart of society. The time of silent faith was over, the cost of the calling. But as this army of believers rose, so did the opposition. I saw persecution intensify. Some lost their jobs. Others were rejected by their families. Laws were passed to silence the voices of truth. The world turned against them, labeling them as extremists, radicals, threats to peace. And yet, they did not break, because something far greater had taken root inside them. I saw a young woman in a hospital room, kneeling beside the bed of a dying stranger, praying with a faith that defied all logic. I saw a man in a courtroom, standing before a judge, refusing to deny what he had seen, even as they threatened to take everything from him. I saw children, yes, children, standing in front of their classrooms, speaking truth with a boldness that left even their teachers speechless. These people were not fearless. I could see their hands trembling, their voices shaking. But they stood firm because they knew. They had seen the truth, and no power on earth could take that from them. The last great outpouring. As I watched, something incredible happened. For every act of obedience, every moment of boldness, the darkness was pushed back. Wherever these people walked, strongholds crumbled. The enemy, who had spent centuries weaving his lies into the fabric of the world, was losing his grip. And then I saw the final wave of awakening, the last great outpouring before the end. It swept across nations like wildfire, reaching places where the gospel had never been spoken, touching hearts that had been locked in chains for generations. This was the moment Jesus had spoken of. The moment when the final souls would come home. The moment when the harvest would be gathered. I turned to him, my heart burning. "What do we do?" he asked. He looked at me with the deepest love I had ever known. And he simply said, "Go." The vision faded, but my spirit was forever changed. I now understood why I had been shown all of this. The time was short, and the mission was clear. But the next revelation would test my very soul. The vision shifted once more, and I found myself standing at the edge of a great divide. The earth beneath me trembled, as if something monumental was approaching. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel it deep in my soul. This was the moment everything had been leading to. All around me I saw two groups forming. On one side, those who had chosen truth, standing firm despite the trials, despite the opposition. Their faces were filled with determination, their eyes blazing with an eternal fire that nothing could extinguish. They had been tested, refined, and made stronger through their trials. They knew whom they belonged to. On the other side, I saw the deceived, those who had been swept away by the darkness, by the lies that had consumed the world. Some looked confident, assured in their own wisdom. Others were anxious, uncertain, as if something deep inside them was whispering that they had made a terrible mistake. And in the middle, a growing chasm separating the two. There was no longer any neutral ground. You were either standing in the light or you were lost in the darkness. The test of loyalty. I saw people being forced to choose. Some were confronted by their own families, parents begging their children to turn away from their faith, spouses torn apart by the division. Others were threatened, jobs lost, reputations destroyed, their very survival placed in jeopardy. The world demanded their loyalty, but the faithful refused. I saw a man in a government office, tears streaming down his face as he signed away his career rather than deny his faith. I saw a teenage girl standing alone in a school auditorium, unshaken as she faced the ridicule of her peers. I saw entire communities of believers, gathering in hidden places, risking their freedom just to worship together. And though the cost was great, their reward was even greater, because they were not standing alone. The presence that strengthened them. In that moment I saw something indescribable. A light, more radiant than the sun itself, descending upon the faithful. It wasn't just around them, it was within them, filling them with a power that no fear, no threat, no earthly force could ever shake. I realized then that this was not their strength. It was His. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead was in them, sustaining them, holding them steady as the world raged against them. And then I saw the final moment of choice. A great storm approached, sweeping across the earth, testing the foundation of every soul. Those who had built their lives on shaky ground, on power, on wealth, on comfort, crumbled in an instant. But those who had built their lives upon Him, they stood, unshaken, unmoved, because they had already won. The call to stand together. As the vision faded, I turned to Jesus, my heart trembling with both awe and urgency. What happens next? Yes. He looked at me with eyes that held both the weight of eternity and the depth of infinite love. Now the final preparations begin, He said. And my people must stand together. A special invitation for you. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to speak directly to you. This message is not about fear, it's about faith. It's about knowing that no matter what happens in this world, we are never alone. That's why this community is so important. We are not just spectators. We are part of something greater, something that is unfolding before our very eyes. And I want to invite you to be a part of it. If this message has spoken to you, if you feel a stirring deep in your heart, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel and leave a like on this video. We don't do this for money. We don't earn anything from this. We do it because we believe in this mission, because we know that the truth needs to be shared. Your support, your likes, your subscription, helps this message reach more people, helps awaken more souls, helps bring more light into the darkness. So, if you want to be part of this journey, join this community. Stand with us, because together we will endure. Now let's continue. Because what happens next will shake the world to its core. The world around me grew still. The visions I had seen, the deception, the awakening, the great separation, all had led to this final moment. A sense of profound stillness settled over me. Yet beneath it, I could feel the undercurrent of something monumental approaching. Jesus stood beside me, His presence filling me with both awe and urgency. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me with the deepest love, yet His eyes held a divine seriousness, as if the weight of eternity itself rested upon this final revelation. And then He spoke. Now the fulfillment of all things begins. The last gathering. I saw people from every nation, every tongue, every walk of life, drawn together by an invisible force. They weren't just gathering in churches. They were assembling in homes, in fields, in underground places where the world could not silence them. This was not a movement of man. It was divine. I watched as hearts were transformed in an instant. Those who had been lost in deception suddenly saw the truth as if their eyes had been opened for the first time. I saw families reunited in faith, prodigals returning home, people throwing away their former lives for something far greater. The final call was going out, and those who answered it would never be the same. The unmasking of the great illusion. Then the vision shifted. I saw the world's systems, political, economic, and even spiritual, beginning to collapse. What had once seemed so powerful, so unshakable, was now crumbling before my very eyes. The false security people had clung to was being exposed for what it truly was. Illusions. A carefully constructed deception designed to enslave the souls of men. And as the world descended into chaos, two things became very clear. Those who had placed their trust in the world were now desperate, lost, searching for answers that no longer existed. But those who had placed their trust in Jesus, they were calm, they were steady, because they had never depended on the world to begin with. The great arrival. Then I heard it. A sound unlike any other. Not of this earth, not bound by time or space. It reverberated through the heavens, through the very core of existence itself. And then the sky split open. A radiance beyond description poured forth. And in that moment I knew. He was coming. The King. The Alpha and the Omega. The one who was and is to come. I tried to look, but the glory was too much for my human eyes. Yet my soul recognized him immediately. The one who had walked with me through these visions. The one who had never left my side. Jesus was returning. And the world would never be the same again. The final invitation. This is just the beginning. As I was pulled back into my body, the weight of what I had seen settled deep into my soul. This was not just a story. This was not just a vision. This was a warning. And a promise. Now I turn to you. This message has found you for a reason. If something inside of you is stirring, don't ignore it. This is the time to stand firm, to seek truth, to prepare for what is coming. But this is not the end. There is more to be revealed. Truths that will open your eyes, that will change everything you thought you knew. And all you have to do is click the next video. It's right there on the screen. That video will be revealing in your life. Don't stop here. Keep watching. Keep seeking. Keep preparing. And before you go, leave a like and comment Amen below. Let this be your declaration. Because those who stand in the light will never walk in darkness again.